Hey everybody, welcome to the Renaissance Woodworker Shop Update for March 10th, 2017. I'm Shannon Rogers, and here's what's happening in my shop this week. There wasn't that much shop time over the last week because I was out of town last weekend. I actually got some cool new Spider-Man artwork for my shop wall up at the Secret Stash in Red Bank, New Jersey. But one thing that relates to previous shop updates is you remember when I laid down my new rubber floor, I said that there was a spot up front that I just ran out of tiles. And I went ahead and ordered 5 more edge tiles. And that's going to allow me to not only fill in that gap up front, but extend the tiles all the way to the back wall. I figured if I was going to order 1 tile, I might as well order a couple more and complete that last row. Yeah, OCD got the better of me. I'm working on a ram tang for the apprentice group at the hand tool school. It's essentially a bench appliance used for holding smaller parts. It actually translates to window pliers. Zachary Dillinger did an article in Popular Woodworking a while back. And I happened to be chopping some through mortises. And just the other day, I got an email about through mortises and through tenons. So I figured I would show you how I do this, because there's a little bit of complication here that the mortises that I have to make are 5/8 of an inch wide. And normally the best way to chop a mortise is by using the chisel that's the exact width of the mortise that you need. I don't have a 5/8 inch mortise chisel. I don't even have a 5/8 inch bench chisel. It's just such an unusual size. I've never needed a chisel that size. So I'll show you not only how we chop through mortises, but how you can chop unusually sized mortises. Now, first things first, you want a nice stable platform to begin chopping on. I always position it right over the leg of my bench, and you guys have seen this before. I've got this little setup here that fits in my leg vise, and it just allows me to clamp the work securely right over the leg. Now, I like to use a pretty heavy duty mallet. This is a 3-pound carver's mallet made by Shenandoah Toolworks. It's a bit of an experimental tool at this point. It's a heck of a lot bigger than their other mallets, which I believe are 1 1/4 and 1.5 pounds. This is just an idea that I'm kind of batting around, and I've had a lot of success using a much heavier mallet. Now, the first thing a lot of people are going to say, well, you've got a metal mallet working on a wooden handle. The key with these mallets, and for that matter with any mortise that you chop, it's not about really walloping on it, it's light taps. And I find that the heavier nature of this mallet, I can take even lighter taps and get a lot further. But ultimately, when you're chopping a mortise with a chisel, it's all about letting the wedge do the work. So I will start right here in the middle, and because this mortise is wider than my chisel, I really am just starting in the middle of the entire mass. And just take a light tap, and it doesn't go very deep at first because there's no place for the wedge to move the waste to. But as I take that next chop, it goes a little bit deeper because now there's an escape route for that waste to go into. Now I'm even deeper. I'm probably about a 1/2 inch deep now. I'm not tapping or not walloping on this, just light taps. And I always work in the direction of the bevel. Now I'm going to turn around and work in the direction of the bevel towards the other side. And as you're chopping, you want to stand along the long axis to determine that you're square. Even though I've got quite a bit of waste on either side of this that I'm still going to have to remove because of this odd-sized mortise. Now I'm going to turn it around and put the flat against the end of my mortise. I'm going to change my body positions. Now I'm sighting down the axis so I can make sure that I'm square. Step back, make sure that I'm square, and just light taps. Let it work its way down. There's no reason to wallop at this point. And you can hear the pitch change when I hit the bottom there. Go to the end on the other side of the mortise, right back to my line. In fact, if you hit real hard, you start to lose control of the chisel. And there's every possibility that the chisel could walk past your line. So nice light cuts are definitely the name of the game. Now I'm about halfway through, maybe a little bit more. I'm going to flip this around and I'm going to come at it from the other side. Really, the hardest part about a through mortise is the layout. You want to make sure that you've got this positioned exactly in the right place. And that comes down to having a nice square, two square reference faces that you can run your squares off of and transfer your lines all the way around. There we go. And now that I'm through, I'll put the bevel towards the end and just work my way back, breaking out that waist in between. Because there's space for that waist to go to, you can actually take pretty big bites now. So now I'm going to set this right on my line and light taps. Just working almost a paring cut at this point with the assistance of the mallet. And essentially at this point, I have a through 3/8 inch mortise. But I need it to be 5/8 inches wide and a full inch long. And what I want to do is use the walls that I've already squared up, use that as a reference point. So I'll drop the chisel against that and then kind of pivot it back so that the rest of the chisel stays on that line. And just a light tap. I'm just severing the fibers right at the edge here. One last tap. Now severing those fibers across the grain means that I can come back with the chisel, and this mortise is 1 inch long. So now I do have 1 inch long chisel, and I can tap my way back. Just going to go halfway again. But because I'm now working across the grain, it comes away real easily. So I can go right to my line, check that I'm square. And again, big mallet, very light taps. Let's flip this around. Let me drive some of that waste out of here. If you clog up the mouth with a bunch of waste, it's just gonna, first of all, get in the way, but you can't see what's going on, and it's also going to affect kind of the feel as you're working your way through. You want this to feel very light, not having to exert a lot of pressure because you've got plenty of room for the waste to drop into. Well, if you've got a bunch of waste wedged in there, it's not gonna work, is it? Again, severing the fibers across the grain. And I'm just going right to my lines here because I've got all this open space in the middle of the mortise. There's plenty of room for the waste to wedge into it. I don't have to worry about the waste pushing back and driving the chisel past my line. Now, I just get that set, and I'm going to take a step back and really check that I'm straight up and down. If you really want, you can grab a square and just hold it up. And I'm vertical. You can keep that there if you want, but the idea is to get everything to meet right in the middle and no resistance. I just met up with my other line. So I know that this wall is nice and flat. Again, I've got a fair amount here, but I'm just going to go right to my line because the wood across the grain is going to break away so easily. And again, there's all this material, all this open space to wedge into. Again, because they're light taps, I've got a lot more control. There we go. Now here, I can just use paring pressure because there's very few fibers actually holding on to this end grain. And one of the things about a through mortise is the cleaner you can make these walls, the easier things will slide together, especially if you've got a nice friction fit. If you're getting tearing on the end grain, it's time to go strop your chisel or stone it or however you're going to sharpen. Now there's my through mortise. It's nice and clean on my lines on both sides. And you can take a square here and actually drop it into the mortise, and you can slide it back and forth, and you can check that it's actually the square is registering against it properly. If you find there's any lumps or bumps, or a lot of times just running your finger, if it will fit down inside, you can feel if there's any uneven parts. Of course, the real test is the fit of your mating tenon. In this case, this is the arm to the ramtang, and I want it to be a good snug fit. So it's slide in there and actually be a little hammer tight. You see how lightly I'm tapping this? And you can hear that pitch change as it bottoms out. And as I look, I've got a really nice gap-free fit. Because essentially you're just chopping right back to your lines. It doesn't matter how wide that mortise is, or how long that mortise is, or whether or not you have a chisel that matches it. Certainly if you have chisels that match and you can do it in one pass, you're going to end up with a more uniform wall. But in the end, it's just about working right back to those lines. And with proper layout to ensure that it's laid out exactly the same size and location on both faces, just chop back to those lines and you've got perfect gap-free through mortise and tenons.